Hello, everyone. How are you? Excited to be here with you today. I cannot believe that we are in September. I said to my son this morning, this is his first Wednesday as a 12-year-old. How does it feel? It's just funny to calculate time differently, right? When you're that age versus when we become adults. So anyways, we are really amazed that it's September already and planning for the rest of the year. I don't know if you are having this issue as well, where time just seems to be a little bit, I don't know, floaty, right? Like it's at least for me and the folks I'm talking to, it seems like it's a little bit harder to gauge. I used to be able to gauge the passing of time a little bit differently, and now it's not the same. So anyways, I was going to talk to you about time today because it's just something I see a resource that I see so many people struggling with. And you might have seen some of my honey badger posts recently about time and people really not understanding the value of their own time, let alone ours, right, when they ask for it. And that's part of the journey of being an entrepreneur, right, is really being an impeccable steward with all of our resources, particularly time, because it's our only non-renewable resource. But I decided that instead we would talk about something in a more three-pronged approach, because this is what I'm seeing, and you're probably seeing this as well. So what is the most underutilized resource, and how do we monetize that? So in my opinion, I believe that the most underutilized resource is consciousness. I believe that we need to be an impeccable steward of our time, as I mentioned, of our money, of our energy. And with energy, I would also say attention in there, and then consciousness. I've talked a lot about being mindful of what we allow into our energy field, particularly over the last few years, being mindful of what spaces we're going into. If we are scrolling, right, we're kind of in our theta brainwaves at that point, and we're actually way more suggestible. It's hard to be a really impeccable steward of our consciousness when we're not being really, really intentional about what gets access to it and what doesn't, and who is vibrating at a capacity that makes sense to invite into our consciousness. So with that in mind, I see this a lot. I see that we are underutilizing tapping into our consciousness to be making business decisions. And when we do that, of course, we open up a field of possibilities. When our brain decides this is the only way we can make money. Just as an example, I literally just got off the call with one of my high-level clients, and she has a certain marketing funnel for her offers, and the numbers aren't adding up the way they normally do. And this can happen, right? It can happen when we have a reference point and we say this particular marketing activity always yields such and such. And with everything moving at the speed that it does and consciousness shifting constantly, those reference points may no longer be relevant, right? What used to work to fill a program, regardless of trends, by the way, just may not work anymore. It might be because we have calibrated differently. It could be that our audience is looking for something different. It could be that the offer is requiring, the consciousness of the offer is requiring a different way to invite people in, right? We don't know that unless we're tuning into consciousness. But in this case, she is so used to this thing fills this thing that because the marketing thing is not having the volume of signups that she's used to having, she's then decided that the offer won't fill because the activity isn't performing the way it usually does. And in doing that, we shut off trillions of other possibilities of how else this offer could be filled if we've decided this marketing tactic is the only thing that's going to fill this thing. So that's an example of how we want to be constantly tapping into the consciousness of our business and asking, what do you want right now? How do you want to be loved up? How do you want to be shared? What do you need right now? How can I fortify you, right? What needs to be cleared out of the system? What needs to be invited in? What's asking to be born? What's asking to be released? All of the things, right? We want to be tapping into the consciousness of money as well to see how it wants to flow to us. There's times that money doesn't want to flow to us in the same way through our business as it does through an investment, or as it does through some sort of other experiment it might have for us. Because in the land of imagination, which is what this planet is, right? We are here to imagine things into form. That's one of our greatest forms of mastery here. then when we go into the energy of possibility and we go into the energy of imagination, there are other things that we're meant to create because we need to have evidence that we can literally imagine anything into form if we decide it, or virtually anything. And then we want to tap into our body consciousness as an example. Sometimes when we're growing, our body consciousness isn't calibrated in a way that's supportive of that quantum leap. So there's times where we need to, again, fortify it by way of what are we inviting into it? What are we releasing? As an example, I go for vitamin IV therapy every week or virtually every week. And recently my body's been rejecting that. It's the veins are just like, get away from me. I don't want this baby catheter going in it and having all of this high potency volume vitamin C and other nutrients being filtered into the blood. There's another way that my body's wanting to be fortified. So I can keep pushing through that and not listening to it and keep wasting my time and my naturopath's time and stressing my veins out and getting all of this weird contraction energy, where I could just tune in and ask my body, what do you need to be fortified so that you have the vitality to run your businesses, to, manage your family, to go on excursions with your son, your husband, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm tuning into all of the levels of consciousness. And then most importantly, I'm tuning into my highest consciousness to see where am I going? What's the clarity of purpose that I'm holding? What am I here to master next? What's in highest service to me? Because if it's not in highest service to me, it won't be in highest service to other people, not because it's about me, but because if I'm not fully lit up by something, it's not going to be of service to other people. I'm just going to show up with a different vibe. I'm using me as an example, but I know we all know this, right? So there's a lot of different ways that we're underutilizing our consciousness in order to make way more money. Sometimes, again, it's really the orange flags, honestly. If you think of all the times that something just felt the texture of an energy just felt a little bit off. Maybe you were hiring a team member. Maybe you were exploring a little bit of a dance with a client, and but something felt off. And for whatever reason, we don't honor that, right? And then we end up getting pretty clear on why the flag was orange, right? It then becomes a red flag. But often we wait for evidence. Well, I've got this orange flag, but I need evidence because someone's going to ask me for empirical evidence as to why I feel the way I do. I can't just honor my intuition. I have to have empirical evidence to prove that my intuition was right. And as we know, it's not often until after we pull the trigger on something that it reveals itself to us. But we already know that our intuition is going to help us make a lot of money, but it's also going to help us save a lot of time and money by just using it. And yet, even those of us that are super intuitive, we don't always honor that for all of the reasons that we don't honor that. So as I mentioned, the second way to generate income and to monetize consciousness is to be tuning into, okay, money, how do you want to dance together right now? Business, how do you want to dance together right now? Body, how do you want to dance together right now? And even just tuning into the collective consciousness and asking, even our communities have a consciousness, right? There's a collective energy in the communities that we've gathered together that we market to, of course, and we send emails to and all of the rest of it. So are we really tuning into that and saying, okay, just because my brain has decided I want to offer these certain things, what is the collective energy asking for right now? What am I seeing in the collective consciousness, and how can I fill this gap? So for example, at the beginning of 2020, I noticed, and I was a bit of a honey badger about it, I was really, and this is my judgment, totally owning it, I was a judgy McJudgerson. I was really astounded at the lack of leadership, open leadership, at the beginning of 2020 when poop hit the fan. And there were a ton of people leading up to that stage that were happily telling everyone they were leaders and allowing people to circulate money through their business. And then 2020 came and they were visibly absent. And I get that everyone was, in hindsight, I get that everyone was going through their own process, and some people were really in shock. They had a massive trauma response and they were frozen, right? They were fawning and they were frozen in that whole stress response cycle. There were a lot of things that were happening, right? But point is that in the collective, there was a real lack of leadership. And I'll say there's still a lack of leadership in the collective in a different way. It's not to say that the leaders that are out there are not doing a good job. They're doing a great job. It's just that we could use way more leadership and way more compound leadership than what we're seeing right now, especially in light of the fact that we're ushering in a new era. We really are in a different paradigm, right? We're seeing the world that we know disassemble itself at a pretty steady pace, and we're seeing a new world about to be born, and it's got a few different possibilities, right? A few different outcomes of how that could play out. So based on what we're seeing, what will actually be of service to the collective consciousness versus what sounds jargony or what sounds flashy, or what is everyone else doing, right? What am I seeing? What's the gap that I'm seeing that can be filled, and or what's the opportunity that I can amplify for myself and other people? And then the third aspect of this, consciousness as an underutilized resource, is that consciousness is the new currency. If we look at even just in the online business world, more and more people are investing in the consciousness of money, in the consciousness of business, and so on. They're looking at it more from that angle, and they're wanting to really be calibrated to their highest timeline, which means there has to be a connection to that. So people are tapping into that for their own purposes, and whatever that is. Certification programs are on the rise. More and more people are wanting to spread consciousness, as my point, right? And be divinely compensated for spreading consciousness. That can be from being a guest expert on a podcast. That can be from hosting a summit. That can be from hosting a challenge and inviting people into something. I mean, there's a myriad of ways, right? But how is what you're doing contributing to the spreading of consciousness? And in the spreading of consciousness, can you give yourself full permission to be divinely compensated for doing what you've been called to do? That's the bigger issue. And in that case, and you've heard me talk about this many times likely, we at this stage, we have to choose where our alignment is. Where are we pledging allegiance? Are we pledging allegiance to the broke healer, starving artist, overworked body worker, whatever your background is? Are we pledging allegiance to that more poverty consciousness vibe? Or are we now taking up full residence in the abundance consciousness and the wealth consciousness and things like that? All consciousness exists, and now we get to choose which consciousness we're going to align to and how to really amplify that. So I hope that helps. I also want to take this time to invite you to my Universal Laws of Ascension webinar that's happening next week. I will pop a link to that in the comments. Every so often, I have so many things that I offer through my sort of main legacy-based company. I have Akashic Record certifications, and I have the Embodied Wealth programs, and then I have business masterminds. And I could probably offer a gazillion more things. But the point is that my background and what got me here is selling consciousness, right? Is selling Ascension, is selling Akashic Records, certifying people, and so on. And a few times a year, I should say, I really like to get back into the channeling and so on. So I'm going to be doing some Ascension activations on that webinar. I'm going to be sharing with you the 3 universal laws that we can be harmonizing with right now and really creating an energetic alignment to that, and doing some other activation to our highest timeline on this Ascension journey. I'll even have a live Q&A as well, because I really want to be supporting people in that. So if you're interested in doing that and you don't see the link, just shoot me a private message and I will make sure that we get that to you. In the meantime, let me know if and how this served. I'm going to pop back into the comments in a moment and say hi to everyone, because I can't see all the comments here the way I would like to now that we're using StreamYard. I'm hoping you have a wonderful week, a wonderful start to September, and I will see you again next week. Bye for now.